Hi, good evening. I'm Kaylee Forbes, the interim specialist for secondary school counseling here with Pinellas County Schools. We're going to get to our guest in just a moment, but together we're partners in navigating the journey to college, career, and beyond. Each one of our Guiding Success series focuses on practical guidance, giving expert advice, and giving parents tools to help you support your student in every step of the way. So no matter where you're at in the process, Guiding Success is here to empower you with knowledge and confidence to help your student. Today, we're going to focus on course selections, and here are our guests to introduce themselves. Liz.
My name is Elizabeth Ferris. I am a school counselor at Largo High School, and I'm also the department head there.
And I am Jill Purcell. I am the guidance instructional lead for the district, and I serve all middle and high schools.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's get started. Parents, our goal tonight is to briefly go through some information around the course selection process, which is aligning your child's goals and their readiness and graduation requirements with their course selections. And we might go through some of these slides a little quicker than normal because we really want to build in some time at the end to answer your questions that you might have. So with that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Liz to talk to you about what matters most with the course selection process.
So when we're looking at graduation requirements or course selection, we want to be sure that we can walk across the stage. So when we talk about that, we go into classrooms and we talk to students about what it takes to just walk across the stage, which is the most important part. However, there are many multiple facets that come into play for us in planning certain courses because of what you may want to do when you leave high school, which is post-secondary plans. And that could be going into the workforce, that could be going into a trade, that also could be going into college or university. And each of those have specific things that you may need to do as on top of the actual just graduation requirements to walk. So we want to talk about when you are selecting your courses, making sure that we are balancing the rigor and also giving you things that you are interested in or maybe think you might be interested in and want to take.
Absolutely. So Jill, I know we previously did a podcast series on understanding graduation requirements, but those factors certainly play into selection of decisions and courses. But if you would just refresh and give a reminder on diploma pathways for graduation.
Yes, for anyone who wants a deeper dive of this, you can search our Pinellas County YouTube page for our graduation podcast, which we go into multiple pathways towards graduation. But the main thing is there's the 24 credit standard diploma for any Florida public school in which you would be ready to go to a 4-year college or university. There's the 18 credit accelerated option for students who are trying to get out of here early, which we say if that's the right path for you, okay, but there's definitely opportunities, even if you're a rising senior and only need 2 credits to graduate, to take advantage of doing dual enrollment with PTEC or SPC or doing OJT and getting, hours to secure bright futures. Plus, if you are planning to go to a 4-year university, a lot of them discourage the accelerated diploma, but if your life and your plans and your goals align with graduating early, then that's something you can always talk to your counselor about. And then there's the CTE pathway, and that includes getting certain CTE or CATE coursework and earning industry credentials. And then that is fewer electives as well. And then the ACE and IB diploma pathways are much more rigorous, and that is specific to certain schools in our district that offer those diploma programs, which we have 3 schools that offer the ACE Cambridge diploma, and we have 3 schools that offer the IB diploma.
And so we talked about what matters most, right? First, obviously, being graduation. So we're reminding you about those credits. But then we also, one of the things we talked about was, secondary plans and goals. And so, Liz, we have 2 examples, right? But talk to families around that advisement in terms of courses that they may not always understand, but it does connect to that secondary pathway.
Yes. So when we are looking at what a student should take, I know most, maybe even in middle school, it might start where we're like, do you have your foreign language? So we might sit down with a kid, we're like, do you have this? And so they may think that that is a requirement for graduation, for high school graduation. It is not a high school requirement for graduation for here, but it is if you're planning to go to university. So we like to plan the students as if they're going to whatever the next highest requirements are. And then we kind of can adapt a plan based on the particular student and maybe what throughout their years they're looking to do. So for example, with the university, we talk about the foreign language. There's also the fact that you do need to get up to Algebra 2 math because it is important. The math classes that you will take at university are going to have that base. And then there's some other core requirements for science. Usually it's chemistry that the universities are looking that you have as well as that.
And we talk about that a little bit later when we get into diploma designations. But I think it's important families get that because we pre-advise as if every student is planning to do this because yes, you can change your mind, right? A student may be on a pathway and then later their junior year go, you know what, I think I want to do that. But that means they're going to have limited place in their schedule. They're going to have maybe an opportunity for less rigor somewhere else because they're having to take these Spanish 1s and 2 or whatnot. And so as your child's going to school, I think it's important for parents to realize almost across the board, every one of our high schools, we're going to pre-advise every incoming freshman as if, hey, we want you to have the opportunity to go on to college if you want to. It's not that we prescribe and think everyone should, but we don't want to take an opportunity away from any kid. And so we normally start with that minimum viewpoint that we want every kid to have that opportunity, and then we can back up from there accordingly.
And also when we talk about one of the things of Florida Bright Futures, it's super important because that is a major scholarship that we have for the state of Florida students, and that is 75 to 100% tuition paid. So they are also requiring these same requirements, not just the basic requirements as well.
Absolutely. And that's a great point because there are some things, right, that maybe satisfy a graduation requirement, but they don't satisfy Bright Futures. We were just looking at one in the maths the other day and somebody asked about that, right?
Yes.
So I think that's important for parents to know that as counselors, we're really looking at all kinds of factors when we make recommendations for your student. And sometimes you might think like, oh, I don't think they need to do that because it's not a graduation requirement, but we're trying to ensure that students have opportunities as they get down the road and they progress. And so she started to allude to that. Jill, talk a little bit about the designations and the diploma pathways that we have. And I already kind of alluded, we make sure all scholars are set up for at least our scholar designee.
Yes.
So cover those other areas.
So you have your diploma requirements, and then these are designations, your little asterisk, if you will. And so with the scholar diploma, you're taking Algebra 2 or equally rigorous course, like say you're taking the dual enrollment equivalent to Algebra 2, and then chemistry or physics, either passing your biology, geometry, or U.S. history EOCs, or you must make in biology and U.S. history, if you're taking those at the AP level, passing that exam will be sufficient in place of the EOC. And then, again, 2 credits in the same foreign language, and then at least 1 college level course to get the standard scholar diploma. And then to get the advanced scholar diploma for Pinellas County, you're looking at meeting those requirements, but then also having a minimum passing score of a level 3 on 3 different AP credits. And so that's kind of the advanced higher level scholar diploma. But the scholar diploma is essentially set up for you to be a college bound 4-year university student and have all those requirements met, and to have some rigor under your belt. And then the advanced scholar takes that a little step further. And just to kind of have a note, the level 3 on the AP exam is for that distinction, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the credit for college with a level 3. That's technically the passing score, but some schools do require a 4 or 5.
And I know we're not at the place because the DAP period is kind of already open. Today's the deadline for early college, early admission. But also for families to understand this scholar diploma designation, aligns really well with early college and early admissions criteria as well. And so in order to qualify for those programs, if that's something that you want your students to be able to do down the road, they will have to have satisfied, these components as well, which is partly, again, why we're always normally advising all students with this, so that if there is something that they want to tap into, or a dual enrollment course or something like that, that we're doing our best to set them up for, for that success.
And then on the flip side of that is the Merit Pinellas Technical College pathway, which is where you're fulfilling the standard diploma requirements and then earning one or more of the industry certifications. So in one of our earlier podcasts, we talked about acceleration points and how important that is for graduation, and you earn that through qualifying scores in a dual enrollment class or on an AP exam or through industry certifications. So the big push for those two is we want students to take advantage of all the great offerings at Pinellas Technical College, but also the different programs at individual high schools that yield certifications and that can help students advance their track at Pinellas Tech, if that's their ambition of completing a program there and fulfilling those requirements, either through dual enrollment or through taking 4 years of a certain academy. Like I know when I worked at Seminole with our engineering pathway, and you could leave with different certifications that could get you a job right out of the gate because you had already fulfilled those requirements.
At Largo, we have many industry certifications, but one of the ones that we do tell the kids is for culinary. The first industry cert is Safe Serve. And when you're trying to get a job, even hosting, busing, you want to work up to server, maybe some of the other positions that are in that, and most people do have that kind of job, whether going to college or doing whatever. We can get that. We're paying for you to get that certification, and it puts you a step ahead.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the goal, right?
Yeah,
right.
I
mean, 100% student success, but ultimately our mission is to prepare all students for college, career, and life. And so that's something important as we're going through the selection process for parents, right? Your child may be college bound, and that could be, starting off at a state college, or maybe they're looking at a state university, or maybe they're looking at a more selective school. And then if that's the case, and that was your child's aspirations to be, an Ivy League school or a more competitive institution, then we're going to probably be advising them under the Pinellas Advanced Scholar Pathway, where we're ensuring that they are, taking those AP classes, excelling in those tests so that they can be more competitive from an admission standpoint.
One of our students, I just remembered, with the Safe Serve, he makes $1 more an hour.
Nice.
In the restaurant.
Right, which is huge. Yeah, that's huge. So with that, as you go through your course selection process, we talked about the graduation requirements and kind of your post-secondary plans and, maybe the different pathways and designations and factors that we take in. But I want to talk briefly about the different types of courses that are offered. And so parents, I think, are common. They're used to seeing, our honors classes or AP or ACE, because often they're at all of our institutions, but some of our schools offer the ACE Cambridge program. We have our IB schools, which that's only courses you can access if you're in the IB program, and then our dual enrollment and obviously CTE classes. But talk a little bit, Liz, about the rigor in those courses and, why those are factors that we weigh in when we're supporting students.
So when we talk about honors, AP, ACE, IB, dual enrollment courses, we want students to know the importance of trying, maybe to try new things and to try a course of that nature. Because what happens is when you take an honors course, you're getting a half of a weight towards your GPA. When you take AB, ACE, IB, dual enrollment, you're getting a full weight towards your GPA. That's important to say because any instance where somebody says, what is your GPA? What is going on? I'm giving them your weighted GPA. You need a scholarship, you're applying to a college, letter of recommendation. I am looking at what your weighted GPA is. So to take these courses and to be getting this weight, it really helps your overall GPA for when you move on. So we talk about that's the rigor. A lot of times when we do talk about rigor, I don't necessarily say it's harder. I say it might be a little bit more work. Right? So if we look at a regular class, you might match the terms. If we are going into an honors course, you might take the terms and I need you to write them in a sentence to show me that you know what those mean. And then in an AP, ACE, dual enrollment, IB, you might be making a paragraph where you're showing all of those terms and using them in the correct sentence. We did the same exact thing, right? We defined the terms, but we did it very differently. So a lot of times students are scared to reach out or to maybe challenge themselves and to take some rigorous courses. And I'm like, it may not necessarily be as difficult as you think,
Right.
because the material that you're doing is exactly the same. And so that's worth noting. And most high schools have a ton of selection of courses. It's not just all the scary AP history or AP English. A lot of them can be even in the sense of elective courses.
Yep.
But even if it is in core courses, just kind of knowing maybe what your strong suits are.
And also, I think there's wisdom that we have that maybe the students and the parents don't always have.
That's true, too.
With like just being fully transparent. We have courses where the state standards and the curriculum and the assessment that the student takes at the end of the year is 100% the same, whether it's an honors or a traditional regular class or whatever. So as a district, I think I've heard parents sometimes be like, they force all the kids into honors. And I can get that if you aren't privy to that. But what we looked at from a counseling standpoint is, if they are literally learning the
Doing the
same
exact
exact standards from the same textbook, taking the same assessment at the end of the year, then why wouldn't we benefit these kids by giving them that extra half weight? And so I think it's important for kids and students to know that. Sometimes you're already doing the work, and we're just wanting to give you credit. And then I know it's a cheesy analogy, but sometimes I think kids need to hear that, because it's like, okay, that makes sense, Miss Forbes, when you say that. But I can remember as a student being an athlete and trying out, and I can remember making varsity basketball in high school, and I can remember being like, I'm 2 state championship rings at the Bogosiega, but I can remember being like, I would start on JV. I would absolutely be starting. I don't know if varsity is like the best place for me.
Right.
I'm not getting the playing time or whatever it was, but obviously, the coach was like, Kaylee, you are going to develop so much more as a player playing with these level and I do have a few brag points, that I'll never forget stealing the ball. I won't say her name, but like those opportunities, you do tend to rise to that occasion. Where if you don't have that challenge and those peers holding you to that standard, sometimes you don't rise as well. And so that's something I try to remind our students of. And I think it's hard to want to push kids, but it translates over in academics too. Like, you tend to perform better if you're in a group with peers that does their homework, they can help you through challenging work, versus taking maybe an easier route because it's an easier A. But sometimes you actually become a lesser student because you put off because you perceive it to be easy as well. So there's so many factors with that rigor conversation.
With the easy and hard also comes into individual personalities and strengths, right? And that's where the balance comes into play. That's my biggest tidbit whenever I do advisement with students is balance. If you hate math, do not take AP Pre-Calculus then. Maybe come back and do math for college algebra, right? But then if you're great at English or great in social studies, absolutely take AP Macro and take those higher level classes in things either that yield your interest or that you potentially want to study in college. Like if you're a college-bound student, okay, it's probably best for you to go ahead and take a psych if you think you're going to be a psych major. Get that 101 credit out of the way and expose yourself to that level of rigor and that field that you could potentially be interested in. But that doesn't mean that you have to take every AP or every dual enrollment class across the board. You're allowed to take up to 6 each semester out of the 7, but you don't have to. And you need to find that level and that balance of where you'll be successful and where you'll earn strong grades, because colleges also won't be impressed if you take 6 AP classes and you're making C's in them, right?
And we also know that students have other things going on.
Right.
Like you just talked about sports. So, they maybe are involved in sports or their church or karate after school, or maybe they watch their younger siblings, and so maybe they have a job. There's plenty of other things that come into the factor than just like you have to take hard classes or that you have to, choose your classes. And that's where it is not a one-size-fits-all, and we want them to really be thinking about, like, where do they want to be, where are they currently, what are things that, like you said, if I'm really good at math, like, let's stretch there, let's not overexert myself in a subject area that I'm not. There's also a lot of elective-type classes, again, that the high schools offer, which is great because I can kind of try to get a background and see if it's something I like, but I'm still at the high school level.
Absolutely. So on that, right, so we talked about different courses. Jill, talk about specifically AP, because I think that's an area, yes, our core classes, we have AP, but I think that's an area also that students can be exposed and looked into other interests and add some rigor in their electives. So speak about AP classes and, those considerations and how it can serve students.
So the one thing that's unique, and a lot of parents will kind of wonder the difference between dual enrollment and AP. AP is universal across the world. We have students in Japan taking AP classes just like we do here in Florida, and they take the same AP exam. So AP is universal college level rigor, and a lot of universities like that because they don't assess you necessarily on the grade you make in the class, but by the AP exam that you'll take in May, and that's how you earn the college credit. Now, it's very specific, and the college actually dictates what credit you earn based on your score, how much, like some schools, if you make a level 5 on AP English language, then you'll get Comp 1 and Comp 2 credit. Other colleges may not do that. So a lot of your AP courses will be accepted at colleges, but some of them, private universities and other places, may make you retake stuff, especially for your major. So they may give you credit for something else to give you that. But that also means you go in, like if you take 6 AP classes, then you're going in with potentially 18 credit hours as a freshman in college, and so you're going in with a full year under your belt.
And even if you don't earn the credit, you're still getting the background and the knowledge of that course.
And you're getting the GPA weight,
and you're
too.
still getting the full quality
So
point
it's
towards your
very
GPA.
much a win-win, especially if you feel like that's an area you excel or, again, want to pursue. And then the AP Capstone Diploma is one thing I really want to highlight because it's new this year that it is a Bright Futures eligibility criteria where students, if they successfully complete the AP Capstone pathway of AP Seminar and AP Research, and then 3 other AP scores, then you can earn the Bright Futures scholarship just by doing that. And then your test score component is omitted because you fulfilled that.
Which is good because there are kids that maybe aren't the best test takers on the SAT or ACT, but they've spent a year, in these AP classes that they're really interested in. My son loved AP Computer Science Principles and like coding was his thing. And so it was a course that he just took actually for interest and fun and, passed that exam with flying colors. And so that's the nice thing is that they can choose these electives and areas that these courses are of interest to them, and they do well in these exams at the end of the year because it's they've been in it all year. It's
And
not
some are
like SAT
task-based.
or ACT.
Some are task-based.
They're so familiar with this content. And so that's a really nice advantage now that you have that with the AP Capstone. But they have something similar, right? So talk briefly about the IB program and those pathways, because IB can even help you qualify for Bright Futures without having those qualifying scores.
So IB is also nationally or internationally known. So students that go through the IB program and they do get the IB diploma, when they're applying somewhere, those universities are recognizing that at a higher mark than somebody who is applying, just from a normal school. So they're rigorous and it's international. It requires specific courses that they take. So sometimes with the IB program, they don't have as many elective options to take because the IB program is kind of set up. They do have some room for like an elective, but it's not as maybe broad as if you were doing AP courses or dual enrollment, where maybe in that elective or dual enrollment or AP course you could choose an elective. And they also can get their Bright Futures volunteer hours or work hours through their CAS project, and they do an extended essay in the end.
Absolutely. I was trying to look at parent questions because they are already strolling in. So I want to quickly kind of go through our last slide so we can get some time over there. So we did talk about AP and IB, and ACE is very similar, and that ACE is a curriculum based. So some of our schools have the ACE Cambridge program they can do, but some of our schools offer like ACE Psych and some other things just like AP that students can take advantage of, and they carry that full credit weight just like a dual enrollment class or IB or AP as well. So with that, you could see there's no right or wrong answer. If you see an ACE class at your school that you're interested in versus an AP, nothing carries more weight than the other. Colleges don't look at them any differently. And as we talked about at the beginning, right, we've try to pre-advise all students on that scholar pathway so that all of our students can hopefully take advantage of dual enrollment, whether that's at St. Pete College or setting them up that they're satisfying graduation requirements so they're in a good place to maybe do our Pinellas Technical College dual enrollment pathways as well. And so I would say that's the wisdom that your child needs to go into that course selection process and thinking through that.
I don't think we noted for all those college level courses, you can potentially earn the college credit, but you are for sure earning the high school credit as long as you pass the course. I don't think we said that.
Yes, that is very true.
And at a full weight.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to be able to jump and get to the questions. And so just to remind kind of our goal in this podcast tonight, right, was to just open up this discussion, give parents a place that they could ask questions, because this is the time of year that course selections are starting in the schools. And Liz, briefly talk about what that process looks at Largo High School when you're advising students for course selections.
Yeah, so at Largo High School, we go into the classrooms and we do a presentation and kind of talk about these exact things, right? What you're looking for when you are selecting your courses, things you should keep in mind, and talk about AP dual enrollment, the differences, P-TECH, all of the things that are going to be available to our students. And then at the end of that presentation, they do what's called a rough draft, and they select their courses, essentially. After that, we do a curriculum fair, a night curriculum fair. We just had ours last night, and students can come around, talk to teachers, maybe get a little bit of idea of what would an AP English class look like, or, what is drafting or welding. And then they can kind of, if they want to, redo their course registration. Then after that, they'll come to the media center, and they will meet with an administrator or a counselor, and we will one-on-one look at where they stand in focus, what they still need for graduation, talk to them about the courses that they did select, and then we'll kind of make that final.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why we wanted to do this podcast tonight too was to really just empower parents, like have these conversations with your students. You might be getting call outs from your schools. So review this and look at their selections. And I think the reason it's so imperative that you do that is this is the best way to set them up for success at the start of the school year.
Yes.
I know as a counselor, we want a kid to get, their every course they want. But when you come in at the beginning of the school year, it's not as easy to do a schedule change, right? Because we use these course selections to build that schedule.
Yep, correct.
So if we have 100 kids express an interest in a class, we try to make sure that, we have at least 3 periods of that class so they can all get into it. And that's where you have more opportunity and leverage is to be like, but I requested this class. Is there any way to get it in? Whereas trying to make schedule changes based upon requests that it's like, you can't change your mind in August or September, right? Even hiring teachers sometimes is based upon like, oh, we had a lot of interest in this. We're going to add a culinary teacher or something along those lines. So we would encourage you to, now's the time to be engaged in that process.
And don't not sign up for a class or have your students not sign up for a class because they've heard things about the class or they've heard things about the teacher. The teaching assignments change every year. And also just because your friend's kid or somebody didn't do well in a certain class does not mean that your kid won't.
Yes.
So make it an individual plan.
And also, like, maybe, that teaching style doesn't align with learning styles, but it's also something we have to teach our kids how to productively struggle with. So maybe they have to do the tutoring after school or during lunch and take advantage of those things. We need students to learn those advocacy skills and, other study habits and ways to succeed, even though maybe that teacher doesn't align, their style doesn't align. Because when you go to college or you're in a technical program, the same thing can happen, and you don't have that privilege to just be like, change me
You're
to
not teaching
this
the way
professor.
I want you to.
And so it is
learning
important,
style.
right? But it's hard. It's really hard because you don't want any student to struggle. But sometimes it's like, but there's things in place for them to be successful, and that's a great point because I do
Also
think
learning coping
sometimes
skills to be successful.
because I do think sometimes people avoid a class because they're like, oh, I don't know what about that teacher, and it's like, oh, but that class could have been great for you. Yeah, could have been great. So with that, we're not going to go through all of these, but parents, this is live online, and you'll be able to come back and watch it. But you can also see some recommendations on the scholar pathways based upon whether advanced scholar, merit. This is not black and white, but it's tools that we have to kind of help kids and counselors think about the next progression. So we have that for English. You can come look at these. You have math, science, and social studies for our main core areas. So those resources you can hop back to. But I guess before we jump into your questions, just reiterating our takeaways. There's no single best track. It is not a one size fits all. There's no right or wrong answer. Really, you want to look at things from, are they satisfying graduation requirements? What are the students' interests and goals? Are they career focused or military focused? And I saw one of those questions on here. Well, what if my kid's going the military pathway? That's awesome. You might be at a school that has a JROTC program, but we might also be like, you know what? Let's throw in some weightlifting. Let's throw in some fitness classes to start working on our conditioning. So there's so many ways that you can look at curriculum, but regardless, all of our students, we want them to aim for that 24 credit pathway and satisfying those requirements. So post-military, if they want to come back and get their degree, they're set up for that college pathway as well.
Well, and they have the opportunity to take the military career placement test in high school. And then from there, if they take that as a junior, that can help dictate, I want to be eligible to do these careers in the military, so I should take these classes.
Which has academic components as a part of it. And most of our high schools do administer that ASVAB test as well. And then going back early on, right, Liz reiterated that, like, you don't have to take every AP class. You want to find the appropriate places to push yourself in that rigor, but maintain balance and taking into account your child's interest. And so we don't want you to feel like there's a prescribed pathway, but we want you to have an avenue to get your questions answered. And I know our schools are super busy this time of year. And so for those of you that have hopped on, some of these questions might be really specific and personal. So the first one I'm actually going to throw to Liz because it connects to her. But this is a parent actually with a child transferring. So they're currently at one school and happen to be transferring to Largo High School. And so they're saying, they said, how do I get connected and help my child do their course selections beforehand since they're not at that school? Who do they connect with? What do they do?
So when they do go through student assignment and they enroll, they should get set up with one of the counselors to be able to get a course thing. Once we have the list of students, like, we can kind of see maybe who we're missing and who we're not, and we can sort of reach out. But also through our registrar office, we would give them the QR code or the link to be able to kind of go in and to do that.
Absolutely. And most schools post that information on their website. But I would say if you've already accepted a spot at Largo or, through special assignment you're there, you could always just call the front office at the school and they can transfer you to the appropriate counselor for your grade level to help you get that squared away as well. And so we touched on this briefly because somebody said, well, what if my child wants to do military after graduation? What process? So I feel like we kind of addressed that because we want every child to satisfy that 24 credit graduation requirement. But depending upon where they're at, we have some great JROTC programs on our campuses.
And also not even just JROTC programs at the high school level. I always talk to kids who are interested in the military about doing the reserves in college and looking at that as an option to explore as well. So,
which means they still have to get into the university that they're going to. And plus, military does require a high school diploma.
Absolutely. And then a parent's asking about the foreign language that you were talking about earlier, saying if it's taken in middle school, but they're high school credits, so they count towards the 2 years of consecutive foreign language required by university.
Yes.
They do. And I always like to clarify on that, like, consecutive languages doesn't mean I took this in 9th grade and then I turned around and took it in 10th grade. Maybe there was a gap. Maybe you took 8th grade Spanish 1 and you didn't take Spanish 2 in 9th grade. But it means consecutive languages, meaning Spanish 1 and Spanish 2.
Yes.
You can't do 1 year Spanish 1 and 1 year French 1 and that count of 2 years of language. It just has to be sequential because sometimes people get anxious thinking like, I have to start over. I had a gap in there.
But not timeline,
Yeah, it's not timeline related. So there's a question around AP Pre-Calc and if that would count as equally rigorous for the Scholar Diploma pathway because we have that listed there. And so generally anything beyond Algebra 2 is considered, would be considered rigorous in that pathway. And that's what universities are looking for. They want to see Algebra 2 and beyond. And so in answer to that question, Pre-Calc does satisfy that Scholar pathway.
And just as a heads up, no Pinellas County school will offer pre-calc honors next year. All pre-calculus will be AP pre-calculus. So that's a change for next year.
Right, which is another area where we're looking at the curriculum and looking at the standards, and it's like, why wouldn't we give the students this extra weight?
And get college credit.
Yeah, instead of a half credit, they get the full, full weight and an opportunity for that college credit, right? Because the curriculum and the syllabus aligned so perfectly. So somebody said it's a little bit off topic, but what about the process for volunteer hours and Bright Futures? How do they submit that? You want to cover that?
So with us, they can do volunteer or work or a combination of both, but there is a packet that they can get either from the college and career coordinator or they can get it from their counselor, and that packet just needs to be filled out, turned back into us, and then we can get those hours into Focus.
Absolutely, and that's how most schools it follows. You also can get those forms on our district website. You can search the Bright Futures form on our district site.
And there is another option if the school that your student is attending offers the Volunteer for Public Service class. That is a surefire way for those students to get their 75 at least hours for volunteering.
Or OJT,
or
if they
OJT
happen to be.
for work hours.
Yeah.
Both of those things during the school day or from the school schedule can help those students earn those hours. And they can start earning them the summer going into 9th grade and then through senior year.
Absolutely. And so here is a question, which we'll throw it to you, Liz, and then I'll add into it if I feel like we need to. They said, if a student's going to SPC, they said, I'm assuming SPC said it's not necessary they take a chemistry class. And so the question is, can you clarify on this?
Yes. So SPC doesn't necessarily require chemistry to get into theirs. When we talk about chemistry, we're usually talking about the university system. So that's the schools like University of Florida, Florida State, UCF, USF are some of the big ones, but then, there's some others, and even across the different states.
Absolutely. So chemistry is normally very equivalent to like an Algebra 2, where if you're going to a university, they want to see that lab science. So just reiterating what we said at the beginning of this podcast, generally speaking, we are going to advise every student to create the opportunity for them for a 4-year university. And realistically, they're going to be more successful in that class at St. Pete College if they've already been exposed to it in high school, because they are absolutely going to have a lab requirement at St. Pete College. So they may not need it to be admitted to St. Pete College, but they are going to need it to have their associate's degree conferred. Generally, they're going to have some type of lab. And so I normally say to students and parents, like, listen, here's the great thing about starting off at a state college. The only criteria is that you graduate with a high school diploma.
Yes.
And so, like, your child's going to graduate with a high school diploma, then they can be admitted to that state college. So to me, it's maximize those opportunities to prepare your success for when you do start at that state college, because your GPA there then carries on with you if they go on to university. So back to that, not needed for admission, but
not needed for admission.
We would probably
Encouraged.
say, yes, you should consider it, especially if you're looking to go beyond after that associate.
Well, and I always like to say with course registration, let's not think about our 15, 16-year-old self, and let's look at our 20, 21-year-old self of what our goals could be. Because, you may be like, I'm going to SPC, I'm not ready to leave home, or that's financially the better option, which is all viable things. But what if you do want to do the FUSE program and transfer to USF, and you decided not to take your foreign language in high school? So then you got to do that in college and stuff of that nature. So that's why it's not that we're pushing every single child to go to a 4-year university. We're not trying to do that. We want kids to do the pathway that's best for them. But we do want to keep those doors open for students to be able to achieve all the different options.
Because that's the thing. If you don't take, for example, you take foreign language, we're talking about chemistry as well. You don't need foreign language to go to SPC.
Right.
However, when you go, they're going to make you take the college level foreign language, which is going to be a little different than our Spanish
To
one or
have
our
the
French
2-year
one.
degree. Absolutely. Yep, because
So.
you have to have that. Yep. So we're going to do a speed round on some of these. So there was a question about, like, how can a student graduate early? What path do they take? And really, it's quite simple. You can go back and look at our understanding graduation requirements, right? But as long as they've satisfied all those graduation requirements, they can graduate early. And your counselors can work with you on that at your school to help accelerate that. But I always like to plan plant the seeds with parents why. If we're accelerating them early to start college early, then maybe stay with us and do early admissions or early college at St. Pete College and have those first 2 years of college paid for, on us. And they're getting both, but making sure you have a plan for that. And there's questions about hope and can that be taken in the summer?
Yes.
Those types of things. Let's speak briefly on hope.
Yes, you could take Hope online. You can take other courses that you would like if you wanted to online. Mm-hmm. And some students do it because they want to take another class that requires a prerequisite.
And you can also qualify for a Hope waiver between athletics, marching band, and JROTC, and that's something that your student's individual counselor can square away with them as well.
And then there's several questions in here around summer classes. How can they do them? When can they register for them? And so I'm presuming that they're talking specifically about dual enrollment. And that normally opens up around March, that you can start, March, early April. That you can start to view those classes and do your paperwork with your school
March
counselor.
17th, I think, is what I looked at today.
Yeah, I was
for
like, I think it's
but
around
I think
March.
I think they don't submit their forms until April.
Yeah, so you can start viewing them around mid-March, and then you do the forms in April for summer classes. And that is something that you can do each summer with dual enrollment, and those courses can be taken care of. Or we do have students that do maybe a virtual class with Pinellas Virtual or Florida Virtual during the summer, and that's an option as well. And that's how some of those students might graduate early, because they might choose to knock out a government or an English or an econ or something in the summer, those half-credit classes.
Or something that some students do is they want to get ahead in math, and they didn't start in the advanced pathway, so they may take geometry honors over the summer so that they can take Algebra 2 the following year. That is something, so you can talk to your student's counselor about the registration. But what I always tell kids is, while it's fresh in your mind during registration, you can go ahead and fill that out, and then you put in the requested start date, and then you can put that for June.
Absolutely.
So you can go ahead and take care of that now.
So I think there's only two other questions if I'm seeing. So one was asking about AP Seminar. AP Seminar is a humanities. Some places
You learn how to write.
Yes, some places classify it as a humanities course. Some might classify it as an English course. It's actually a course that you're not going to get a core credit for it, right? So, however, from a support in college, AP Seminar, AP Research, that capstone pathway is teaching your child research skills. How do they vet sources? How do they cite MLA, APA, right? Skill sets that are essential. Doesn't matter what your major is when you go to college.
It's all skill set, but it's also they're working with other students and they're picking what they want to learn, and that's one of the coolest things. So they're not going into, I guess we could say, like a seminar research class where I'm telling you to go study this. You're telling me what you want to get out of it and what you want to learn, and so that also adds and builds to the interest of the course.
But for us, it's really an elective.
Yes.
The colleges might look at it as a humanities or something like that. But from our district standpoint, it is an elective credit because they were asking if they could substitute for U.S. history. Unfortunately, state statute requires students have an economics, a government, a world history, and a U.S. history credit. So you couldn't change those. But you certainly could look to add a fourth area and, do some of the electives in those areas, even if it's like AP Euro History or AP Human Geography.
And that's a reason to take a class online over the summer, is so that you can fit certain stuff into your schedule too.
Correct.
We don't take all the classes in the summer. That's not what summer's for. But.
Yes, but I did see someone ask, are summer classes only offered at SPC? So typically FLVS or Pinellas Virtual, you could jump ahead and do classes there.
But they don't offer AP or college level over the summer.
So right, because those exams are scheduled for May, so they generally don't let a kid do it in the summer because you're so far removed from when you would be able to take the exam. So most of our students doing summer credits and trying to get ahead, it is through dual enrollment. As a school system for high school students, the only summer classes we have is for recovery, but not for a get ahead. So if your student does have some credits they need to recover, we do offer summer bridge at our high schools where they can make that recovery, but they can't necessarily get ahead or take advanced classes in that way. So here's our final question. They have a rising junior, and they want to know how they apply for the electrician course at PTC. Is it a half-day thing, or what does that look like?
So they would take their first 3 classes at PTC, and then they would come to their high school for their core courses, is usually how it works out. So that's why it is important that even if you are wanting to do something like that, that all of those other prior graduation requirements that you were fulfilling and doing, and not kind of saving it for later or whatnot, because we need to be able to create room in your schedule. But yes, they could start doing that. They could start getting certifications. Again, we as a district are paying for them to do that and to get those certifications and graduation requirements.
They will need to fill out the dual enrollment application, and it's a requirement that they attend, and they changed it this year.
It's online. Yeah.
The shadow day is no longer required. It's
Yes.
an online orientation that you sign up for.
Absolutely. And the good thing is we actually have a meeting with them tomorrow to go over some timelines, trying to improve that and move it up. So we'll be getting this information sent out to schools for the PTC side of things specifically to help streamline that. But I would encourage you to reach out to your schools. You can always also come in and email Jill or I, because we know this time of schools, our counselors are super busy. They're in
Typically
classrooms
not in their
nonstop.
offices.
So being able to return phone calls or get back to an email on the same day, it's hard if you're in classrooms nonstop doing lessons with kids. But you can always reach out to us here at the district office. So that's Forbes, M as in Margaret, or Purcell, J-I at pcsb.org. We can answer those questions as well. And I think the final question I saw in here, somebody said, okay, but my child got into early college, early admission, so that I still choose his classes at his high school anyways. Yes.
Yes.
Always
you choose just in the event that
Yes,
something
always
happens
choose.
or you decide not to. The fact that you have the option is great. And
Yes.
Absolutely. So I'm hoping parents, as I've scrolled through these, that I have not missed any of your questions. But again, I will put in the chat both my email and Jill's email. So if you have a question that was not answered tonight and I inadvertently overlooked it, don't hesitate to shoot us an email. Come back and watch this series. But hopefully you feel a little bit more informed and you're sitting in the grace that there's no black and white answer. There's no right or wrong answer, but really just exposing your kids and pushing them appropriately. Sometimes it's okay for them to struggle. So figure out where that rigor is. Make sure you have the balance and encourage them to start looking into those areas that they can expand their own electives and start to figure out maybe their next steps. This is the best time for them to start to explore and figure out maybe what they want to do once they graduate and spread their wings. So as always, it's been our privilege to host this tonight, to share with you, and hopefully you'll keep coming back to our Guiding Success, where we help support you in making your scholars continue to soar. Have a great night.